أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري وأحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, brothers and sisters, youngsters in Islam and Iman, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: who is the Holy Prophet of Islam, Muhammad? Continuing our conversation that we began some time ago on the life and times of the Holy Prophet, given that we are in his days, in particular in the commemoration of the time of the birth of the Prophet, it's important for us to reflect on the life of this great man. And it's important for us to reflect on his life for a few reasons, a few that I've mentioned in the past, that you can see on the previous recordings to see what is said. But also it's important to know because we're in an era and time of Islam in the West and in America where we need to be able to explain to people what true Islam is. Many of us may have been listening to majalis our whole life, and in that process, you may know quite a bit, or maybe you're still learning. We all are. We all should still be learning. But at the same time, we have a responsibility to make sure that the true image of Islam is conveyed to our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, because many of them may be susceptible to false information, misinformation, fake news, as it's stated. Fake news is not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for a long time. And the reality of the matter is, you and I need to be those agents to help our Christian friends, our other people of faith, even those who may not have a faith, to help them truly understand who Rasulullah was, so that ultimately they can truly understand what Islam is all about. That's why we embarked on discussing, for example, in the life and times of the Prophet, the works of Dr. Henry Stubb, who spoke about Rasulullah for the first time in a positive light and said that, hold on a second, the Western world has got Muhammad wrong. Muhammad was just he was a prophet in the line of Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. So it's an Abrahamic faith. They believe in one God. They don't believe in many gods. Allah is just a term for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one true God. And many people at that time did not know this because their information was biased, number one, and number two, even the sources that they used were not the most authentic sources of Muslim history, the likes of the works of Tabari. As you recall, I remind you, some of the first translations of the life of Rasulullah came from the works of Tabari. So first of all, Tabari is not the most reliable from our perspective and the general Muslim population. So they would say not everything 100% is authentic. Number two, the translations were poor because people's Arabic may not have been that developed. So it's important to note this. In Tabari, you'll also find the works of, for example, some of traditions that state the likes that Rasulullah, God forbid, hasha lillah, had been possessed in certain times when certain verses came. This is where these types of things emerge. So if you're going to use that as the basis of explaining the life of the Prophet to Europe, to the Western world, that's probably not the best place to start. So it's important to know these things, number one. Number two, it's the era and time where we have to share with our neighbors, our friends, and other people that we live with, that maybe our clients, that look, what is true Islam? True Islam is found from the life of the Prophet. The example of leadership is found from the life of the Prophet. The example of compassion and mercy is found from the life of the Holy Prophet. Whereas they may have gotten an image of the Prophet of someone who was a warmonger, God forbid, because this allegation has been made on Rasulullah for a long time, that he fought wars. This is when the Western world, not their fault necessarily, it's just the information or the misinformation that they got, that they conflated the history of Muslims after Rasulullah and Rasulullah's life himself. Yes, some Muslims after Rasulullah did commit wars and they did cause bloodshed, but you cannot say that's true Islam of Rasulullah. That is the history of people who came afterwards. So we need to make that clarity. How do we make that clarity for our neighbors? By understanding what people like Henry Stubb have said historically about the Prophet, what people like George Bernard Shaw said about the Holy Prophet, what people like Leslie Hazelton have said about the Prophet, what people like Karen Armstrong have said about the Holy Prophet, to how to explain this person to the world so they truly understand who he is and they are not misinformed. The likes of when, for example, we say that the people like Leslie Hazelton and Karen Armstrong, they're saying things like, Muhammad is a prophet for our time. For our time? How? Because he was fighting jahl or ignorance. And we still have ignorance today. How do we use this? We need to use this to explain this to other people about the life of Rasulullah. Therefore, I want to focus and elaborate on just a few things in this short discussion and talk with you from the life of the Holy Prophet that we can learn so that we can understand what he was truly about. We also need to understand where do we differ from other Muslims, not to offend or not to disrespect or dishonor anyone, but in order to understand what is our true faith and our true creed. And once we understand our true faith and our true creed, we can then share it with the world in the truest sense. And there will not be that communication or miscommunication, I should say. And what do we look at? Number one, what age, when did Rasulullah start to get wahi and revelation? Where was the Quran revealed? What are the theories according to our scholars? And finally, the third point that I want to discuss tonight is with respect to the first revelation, what was the background around it, and what is the view of the general Muslim world, and how is it possible that this may differ amongst Muslims? And finally, what is it that the Holy Prophet stood for, and how is it that his family actually continued this message on after he left this world? This is our agenda for the brief moments we are together in this talk. Wherever you are hearing my voice, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. At the first level, when we come to the life and times of the Holy Prophet, it's very important to understand that he was someone who came as a mercy, he came as a guide, he came as a teacher, he came as someone who was there to help society for its betterment. He moved the tribal Arabs from tribes to a nation, an ummah. He looked after, he said to look after, based on the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, and revelation, to look after the needy, to look after the poor, to look after the wayfarer, to look after those in need. This was the ethos of what Islam was. Rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, huquq Allah and huquq al-ibad, the rights of God and the rights of the people. Believe in God and the last day and the prophets, and make sure that you do good to mankind. The essence of Islam: do good to the poor, the orphan, the traveler, the free and emancipate the slaves. How many verses of the Quran give the reward of freeing the slaves? These things were what Islam was about in its essence and in its heart. And when we get to understand that, then you understand some of the other apparitions around what happened in the Islamic mission of the Holy Prophet. The first thing that I want to say, and this is something that you may not have heard of, but is found in our view, the Shiite view of the revelation. We typically hear that the first revelation on the Prophet happened at the age of 40. However, as we believe it, and as you know, our belief is the Prophet was born a prophet. From birth, he was a prophet. In fact, even before that, كنت نبيا وأنا آدم بين الماء والتين. I was a prophet when Adam, the first of creation, the first prophet, was between clay and water. That is, when he was being created, I was already a prophet. But in the physical form, we say the prophet, he announced his prophethood at 40. However, within our views, and this is where it's important to be mindful, there are narrations that say the prophet got his first wahi at the age of 43. He would go to Ghar Hira, he would go to the cave of Hira, and he would seek this inspiration, and he would seek this understanding, this meditation and contemplation, as we would say. But at the age of 43, according to some of our narrations, the Prophet got the first revelation. We have narrations from Imam Ali that would say, for example, when the Prophet would go to this what we would call meditations, or these reflections in the Ghar of Hira, in the cave of Hira, that they would also pray. And Imam Ali says there were the three people who were praying in the early days. The first of being Rasulullah, the second being Bibi Khadija, or Lady Khadija, and the third, I was the third. Amir al-Mu'mineen was the third of these individuals, the first and foremost. That's why historically some people came forward and said that in the elders it was this, in the women it was this, in the children it was this, because they had still thought, because of their tribalism, that age in this context matters. That is, if Ali was only 10 years old or so, or around this age, then how is it possible that Ali is the first Muslim, so to speak? And he's praying right at the beginning with Rasulullah. They said age has to be the most primary, so they found that who's the oldest man in that view. And also the same with women. They said it's the Prophet and then a lady. How can it be? That same type of tribalism and that same type of discrimination was still in their minds, that how can it be that the first Muslims are a lady, the first Muslim is a young boy? This was their mindset. Whereas Rasulullah is saying, look, all you are seeing is a young boy, all you are seeing is a lady, but you're not seeing what I'm asking you to see, which is Iman, which is taqwa. That's why Rasulullah, he said, no Arab is better than a non-Arab, and no non-Arab is better than an Arab. Going back to the ethos, we are one nation, one ummah, everyone is the same. This is another distinction between what was Islam during Rasulullah's time and what Islam became after Rasulullah. Meaning what? Rasulullah fought to get rid of the caste system. You know, our Sikh friends, we just had a couple of interfaiths. We had an interfaith this week, and we've been having a series of interfaiths, and it's very important to have these discussions so we understand other people's view and they understand our views. Do you know that there are certain Christian denominations, not because they're bad and not because of any other reason, except they may have gotten misinformation or someone told them something, and Chinese whispers over and over again, things changing in their views of eschatology or the end of times. They believe that Jesus will come again, but some of them think that the people that Jesus will be fighting are Muslims. Not all Christians, some of them do believe it, but not all. The same way we go for ziyarah, some of the Christian community go for ziyarah to the Middle East, and some of them are actually seeing where Jesus is going to come, where Isa alayhi salam is going to come, and they believe that this part, which is the contentious part and the difficult part, is that Hazrat Isa will fight Muslims. Whereas our view is Hazrat Isa, Jesus peace be upon him, and Rasul and Imam al-Zamana, who is the representative of Prophet Muhammad from his line, will come together and they will work together. But it's our job to try to explain to them that that understanding that they may have is perhaps not the right understanding, that historically Islam had good relations with the Christian community, and the Christian community has had good relations with Islam historically always. Many non-Muslims in our world think that their story of Islam begins when, for example, the tragedy at 9/11 happened, for example, in which many Muslim people were working there as well in the towers. But many people think this is what Islam was. Before that, I grew up in America here before that. Many of you remember that time. Muslims were generally under the radar. And so it's important for us to see now, how is it that we do tabligh? How is it that we share the peaceful, righteous message of Rasulullah and his family through these understandings? So the first thing is this revelation, when it emerges, there's a difference of views. In our view, our scholars say, some say it's 40, some say 43. Why did they say 43? Because we know Rasulullah left this world at the age of 63, and there are narrations that the period of revelation was not 23 years, but in fact it was 20 years. You will find in our books, there are narrations that say that the period of revelation was 20 years as opposed to 23. Now, there's no kufr here, there's no leaving Islam here. These are the riwayat and the narrations. Now, here comes the question as to what solves the dilemma and solves the problem. What solves the problem is very clearly this. When was the Quran revealed? Was it revealed over a 20-year period or 23-year period? The scholars say the instantaneous revelation of the Quran, that one time, and then gradual. There's two different things. When it comes to Laylatul Qadr, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Inna anzalnahu fi Laylatul Qadr, when that comes forward, the Quran, that we descended the Quran in the night of Qadr, that Laylatul Qadr is that one moment where the Quran was descended. Now, there's a difference of opinion. Some scholars say that was the descension from Baytul Ma'mur. Baytul Ma'mur is the true house of Allah in the heavens, and that is the one that is directly above our Kaaba in the heavens. That is that revelation directly there. The other group of scholars say no, the Quran descended at once on the heart of Rasulullah. It descended at once on the qalb of Rasulullah. And once it was revealed on the heart of Rasulullah, then gradually over a period of time, it slowly began to be revealed from his heart. Jibreel would come and say, Ya Rasulullah, that verse of the Quran that is in your heart, tell the people in this circumstance at this point in time that this verse applies. And this was the narration from our perspective with respect to the Quran, it coming to the heart of Rasulullah. The same Quran that the Quran itself says to us, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله, that if we had descended this Quran on a mountain, you would surely see that the mountain would crumble out of the grandeur of the Quran. What is this Quran? That the mountain would crumble, but the heart of Rasulullah is able to hold and control and take in the verses of the Quran. It's a book that is a guide for us that we need to develop a relationship with as much as possible within our life to understand this messenger, to understand Islam, to understand what is the truth. And this same moment, as I conclude here, I want us to reflect on this was the heart of Rasulullah that was able to take the verses of the Quran. But I ask the question with respect to this prophet, what was the heart of this prophet? The heart of this prophet may perhaps have been those individuals who this prophet himself said, Al-Hasan wal-Husayn, imaman qama aw qa'da, that this Hasan and Husayn are imams, whether they stand or they sit. This heart of Rasulullah may have been that grandson that Rasulullah himself says, Husaynu minni wa ana min al-Husayn, that Husayn is from me and I am from Husayn. Ahabba Allah man ahabba Husayna, that verily that I love the one who loves Husayn, that Husayn is from me and I am from Husayn. Allah loves the one who loves Husayn. This Husayn, what did this ummah, what did this nation do to the heart of Rasulullah? 2 moments of Masai, which is Thursday night, my dear brethren and my dear sisters and my dear elders, Azadaro kehte hain कि ये दिल पैगंबर थे, कौन इमाम हुसैन, और कल्ब पैगंबर पे, दिल पैगंबर पे कुरान नाजिल हुआ, और दिल पैगंबर हुसैन इब्न अली, रसूलुल्लाह ने खुद फरमाया, हुसैन मिन्नी व अना मिनल हुसैन, और ये हुसैन के साथ उम्मत ने क्या किया? कहते हैं कि रोज़े आशूरा इमाम हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम की दहन मुबारक, उनकी ज़बान खुश्क थी, मुंह सूख गया था, और अशकिया वार पवार करते जाते थे, हत्ता के एक मरहला ये आया कि आयत फिर से आई और फिर से सदा आई, वही आयत जो पहले आ चुकी थी, या अय्यतुहन नफ्सुल मुतमइन्ना इरजिई इला रब्बिकी रादियतम मर्दिया। ए हुसैन बस बस। इमाम हुसैन ने अपने तलवार को नियाम में रखा, और जब रखा जो भी था, जो अपने आप को उम्मत रसूल से कह रहे थे, जो अपने आप को कह रहे थे हम मुसलमान थे, सब ने वार किया, सब ने हुसैन के जिस्म पे वार किया, मगर या रसूल अल्लाह आप पे लाखों सलाम हो, आपके दिल पे कुरान उतरा, और आपका दिल शायद हम कह सकते हैं कि हुसैन है, मगर जालिमों ने और अशकिया ने और आपके उम्मतियों ने जो अपने आप को आपकी उम्मती कह रहे थे, उन्होंने क्या किया? उन्होंने ये जुल्म किया कि उन्होंने हुसैन के दिल पे वार किया। और वो कैसे? कि अली अकबर इब्ने इमाम हुसैन शबीर पैगंबर को कत्ल किया इमाम हुसैन की आंखों के सामने। इसलिए शायर कहता है, जिसने तुम्हें मारा वो मुसलमान न होगा। ए अली अकबर, जिसने तुम्हें मारा वो मुसलमान न होगा, थे तुम तो मोहम्मद की निशानी अली अकबर। وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Ya Allah, we ask you to accept this ibadah. Ya Allah, we ask you to allow us to learn from the life of Rasulullah, to allow us to give a righteous and true impression, an honest impression of the life of Rasulullah. Ya Allah, we ask you to allow us to understand his life so that we can reflect his compassion, his mercy, his love, and his affection for humanity in our actions. Ya Allah, we ask you that anyone who's suffering in this night, allow them to be alleviated of their suffering, of finances, financial difficulty, of health difficulty, of wealth difficulty, whatever it may be. Bring solace to their hearts. And Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. And a final request to please recite a Surah Al-Fatiha for your marhameen, for our marhameen, for the sponsors marhameen, for all those who serve the community day and night. Please recite a Surah Al-Fatiha for their marhameen, and especially for anyone who does not have someone to recite a Fatiha for them in this night. Surah Al-Mubarakat Al-Fatiha ma'as salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.